Welcome to another episode of Real Estate AI Flash. And today's guest, usually we have real estate agents on the podcast, but today I believe we have a thought leader. We have Dan Foody, CEO and founder of Cloze, the AI-powered sales and marketing platform built for real estate agents and brokerages in the industry. So, Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Rajeev.
Yeah, looking forward to digging in. Every now and then we get people that are building solutions for agents. Agents, very few agents want to dig in on their own and learn a new technology. They just want the easy button. And I felt like, having you on the pod, talking about your journey and what you guys are building would be very timely for us. So let's start with, I gave you like a real short introduction for probably for a couple of decades of a career in real estate. Walk us through, how did you get into real estate and bring us to today?
So, I did not start in real estate at all. I've been doing enterprise software for 30 plus years. Like, I spent a stint doing software related to hotels and airline reservation systems. Funny enough, right about around the time where there's this pesky guy named Rich Barton who was trying to disrupt the space. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before.
Yeah, yeah. Z guy.
Yeah, and when we started Cloze, we still weren't even thinking about real estate at all. What our thesis at the time was people didn't have good tools to manage long-term relationships. Most of the tools are really transactional. They're about, get a lead, close the deal, on to the next person. And so we were really thinking about just rethinking that idea of what happens when you have a client that lasts forever. And that was, the impetus. We started selling on the App Store and Play Stores. We were very industry agnostic, but it's about 6 years ago now, we had a broker owner who was a customer of ours. And because we sold on the App Store, we don't really know many of our customers, but he reached out and said, "Guys, you have no idea how perfect you are for real estate." And so we said, "All right, we'll listen." And so we sat down with him, learned more, figured out what the gaps were, and realized he was probably right. And so we decided to focus on real estate. And now it's 80+% of our revenue.
Wow, that's great. And you mentioned briefly there a point that we should double down. Everybody sort of teaches, real estate shouldn't be transactional, it should be relational, it should be long term. But somehow the tech doesn't seem to support that in many cases as we
Yeah.
start to think about it. And I think you guys have sort of got into that space of building relationships, long term relationships, lifetime clients. We talk about it,
Mhm.
at Berkshire Hathaway, we talk about forever clients. All of that is
Yeah.
similar. So the tech needs to come along to support that. So um, I asked this question to all my guests, but I figured your response is going to be a little different to this. Most people got familiar with AI when ChatGPT first launched November. We all know, I mean, at least the generative AI movement started then.
Yeah.
But, you mentioned Rich Barton from Zillow, I mean, Zestimate. There's a lot of technologies that have been leveraging AI pre that. So it's a two-part question for you. When was your first light bulb moment with AI in general, and then the Gen AI light bulb moment? Personally or professionally, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so when this is going to sound crazy, but when I first started working with AI, it was a fairly brief stint, but it was back in 1987.
Whoa.
And so if you Google the term AI winter, that was like the beginning of the second AI winter. It's when AI disappeared for the second time. And so 87 was the second time AI got hot and went and disappeared. So I've been tying it into this for a long time. And then I got back into it probably around 2010-ish and really started working heavily and since then. But on the Gen AI side, so having been really deep in it and have been in for 10 plus years now, when ChatGPT launched, just the launch of it was an immediate aha for me. I kind of describe it to people as this was the digital photography moment. And what I mean by that is that if you think back to before digital cameras, there were all these specialized people and nerds who, like me, who had like fancy camera gear, and but not many people were really did a lot of photography. You had to hire people to do it. And then along came digital photography, and literally everyone could be a photographer. And so the launch of ChatGPT was that realization for me. Was it was this digital photography moment, because before that you had to be a real stats nerd techie to be able to do anything with AI. And now anyone could get AI to do stuff for them. And so it's that transformation. But I think the interesting thing about, if you take the lessons from the digital photography world, there was another thing that happened then. What happened was that it actually switched the market into sort of two levels. And so the people who made their living doing bad photography essentially disappeared and had to find new jobs. But the people who were good at it, they became 10x better at it with digital photography. And then everyone could be a photographer. So there's those kind of three things. And I think we're going to see the same happening in real estate, that it's for the people who are good at it and want to apply themselves, it's going to make you 10 times better. But if your goal is to never talk to a client, the robots are going to win and you're going to be out of a job.
Yeah, no, that's a great analogy. I feel like as I talk to agents and thought leaders around the country and at conferences and conventions, most people are using AI to sort of do some tasks that they don't feel like they can do or can save time. Collapsing time seems to be the starting point for a lot of agents using Gen AI tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. But to your point, it's not just replacing the task; it's elevating the output of the task, also, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's really where the 10x productivity enhancement output, because our clients are people, consumers are using AI. They're getting familiar with the tools of what's possible, searching for agents in ChatGPT. So they're getting used to all this stuff. So I think as an industry and everybody listening, we all need to evolve and we need to have our journey of learning and getting better and embracing the right tool set. So it's a good takeaway. Digital photography. Nobody's ever used that analogy. That's a very, very good analogy. And so
Glad to bring something new to the podcast
there,
after so
there you
many
go.
episodes.
Well, you always are going to bring something new. I know, Dan. So let's kind of get into, um, most agents are starting to use AI at some level with the variety of tools. I built some custom GPTs for real estate agents to write listing descriptions, listing appointments, social captions, all that stuff. But at the end of
Yep.
the day, they work with their CRM, their clients, which is really their bread and butter. Let's talk about how you, I guess, evolved Cloze and leveraging AI as part of that to help agents make good decisions and timely decisions to build that lifelong client relationship.
Yeah, so when we started doing AI, and this is, almost 10 years, actually more than 10 years ago now, a lot of the things were to really help identify opportunities for agents and offload them from some of the common tasks that people hate. So one example is we use AI to read the signatures off every single email that you receive and then compare that to your contacts so that if there's new contact information, your contact is automatically updated. And I'm going to guess that amongst your listeners here, no one really likes manually updating contact information. So
That's fair,
it's a
100%.
common thing.
Yeah.
But that was kind of one of the early ones that we did. We have a whole bunch of other ones that are really about who should be focusing on what you should be doing. But as we got deeper into it, we started to find opportunities to just catch the things people missed. So, for example, one of the AIs looks for when clients give you action items. So they say, I need your feedback on the offer letter by next Tuesday. It figures that out, automatically adds it to your agenda. It turns out we also have one that does the opposite, because a lot of people promise things and they forget what they promised. Like, I will get you that document by Wednesday. And so we have an AI model that detects the things you promise people and make sure you keep your promises as well. And so these are kind of examples of where we started using it to really make sure people were on top of everything they had to get done, all the items, get rid of the basics. But I think at the time in those early years, you didn't have the way to be able to help people then go the next mile and actually create the content, create the responses and things like that. And that's where Gen AI is as the first level starts to hit is that, and you mentioned that, right? Which is the idea of I can use it to craft a response to a client, design a listing description, and all those things. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people are. There's a lot of vision and dreams of where AI is going to go next. That is much going much further than that. Kind of combining those two, where AI can do things outbound for you. It can actually, you can tell it, go talk to the local municipality and get a document from them. And so I think we're still a ways from that being reality, but this is the direction that I think is the next piece where you connect all of those dots together.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think and as you, it's probably the first technology, at least in my lifetime. I'd love to hear your thoughts, Dan. That this is growing at such an exponential pace. I have never seen a tech grow at such an exponential pace. I mean, I think when I got my first iPhone in 2004, iPhone 4, you couldn't even download apps for the first 8 months. What you saw is what you got.
Yep.
And look at iPhone 17, which just got released last week, and that took a good 20 years to get to iPhone 17. I feel like we're with AI in 2 years, we're almost at iPhone 17, and that's crazy, the speed of innovation. So the point I was making was most people start with ChatGPT, AI tools to kind of almost replace Google. Just ask
Mm-hmm.
questions, get a
Yep.
response, human-like response, and then you go to custom chats that are trained for certain things. Like I have a
Mhm.
trained chat for all the marketing I do for my podcast, and then you
So
go to
my co-founder has a really funny one. He calls it Jargon Slayer, and it's trained to simplify paragraphs
there
and
you
make
go.
them easier.
Yeah, exactly. So custom chats, and then you could build for repetitive tasks. You build custom GPTs, and then you go
Yep.
to AI agents that basically work autonomously and at very minimal human input to do the things that you need to do to connect the dots. To your point, right? And I think we're all on that journey, and I agree. I think we're already starting to see AI agentic workforce at some level, and I think this time next year we'll start to see them fully embedded in many companies
Yeah.
at some level.
And I'm going to be a little bit contrarian on that point in
Please.
some senses because I think a lot of the hype around agents that can operate themselves is dependent on the technology continuing to evolve at the same pace it has evolved,
Yeah.
and getting towards what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence. And I think now, just in the last couple of months, people have realized that that's not going to happen for decades still.
Yeah.
And so if you think about like the evolution of GPT-4 to GPT-5, it's a little better. And yet OpenAI is going to lose, not spend, lose over $100 billion in the next 5 years. And so I think we're hitting, the technology is amazing already, but we're hitting a bit of a plateau. And so I think the way we have to think about it is different than just assuming it's going to solve all the problems. Like, and the big example I give there is what people call hallucinations, which
Yeah.
is you just make stuff up, right? And we've all seen, especially Google, make stuff up all the time. And I think there's been a belief that that problem is going to be solved, and it's not looking like it is. So when we did, so the challenge in designing agents as we get into the next year and the next 2, 3, 4, 5 is really going to be around keeping these things on the rails, keeping them making decisions that are real and not making stuff up. And I think a lot of people had assumed that wouldn't be a problem, that the technology will just keep going. I think it's going to continue to be one of the biggest problems, in fact, of these
100%.
agents.
I think we're at a time, at least for the next year or two minimum, that human in the loop. I always talk about human in the loop for
Yeah.
anything you're building. And second point is, I mean, I think the way you reduce hallucinations is you put guardrails around and really have them use proven, trusted sources for your data. It's maybe a company data. For an example, I was talking about to a marketer the other day, and you want to write a blog every week. Let's just call that as a cadence. Feeding AI with all of the articles you've written up to this point for trends and feeding your ICP, ideal client profile, all of the data. But if you just ask it to write a blog, it's just going to be AI generic, hallucination, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of learning and steps we all have to take as an industry for us to evolve to a point where agents are actually effective?
Well, I think there's two other things. Agents still hallucinate when you feed it all of the information that you want it to. They still make stuff up, not at the same rate,
Yeah.
but they're like your most eager assistant, just out of college who wants to get the boss some answers, and they'll do it no matter what if the information that isn't there doesn't let them answer the question well. The other thing that is most people don't understand the impact of is what's called the context window
Yeah.
in AI. And so the context window is so just stepping back for a moment, AI doesn't learn. It has no ability to learn stuff. And so that's the big thing that isn't obvious is AI can't learn anything. All it can do is remember. And the idea of remembering is this context window, which is it will keep the last, you know, let's say 100 pages, 200 pages of information you feed it. But if stuff rolls off the end of that, it's completely forgotten like it never happened. And so you run into these challenges of if this, whatever AI you're using, you fall outside of their context window, it's as if that information doesn't exist whatsoever. And so, if you only have a few blog posts, great, it can probably handle that. But if you probably tried to put in the transcript from every single one of your podcasts and all of the nuance and details, you're probably rolling off data off the end of that, and it's not going to be able to do
Yeah.
that. Um,
One comment I
so
want to
that
make about, and for the listening audience, if when Dan mentions context window, it's just think of it as the RAM on your computer, as an example, like a memory, hard disk space, etc. So ChatGPT at the time of this recording has a certain context window. I forget it is 32K or something like that, and
Yeah,
256K. And then
actually, depending on which models you
which
pay
models
for,
you
you get
pick. And then
context.
Gemini, it looks like has the highest context window at the time of this recording. But I think that will, in my mind, that's sort of like hard RAM at this point, a hard disk space. I mean, you can go to terabytes of information. My first computer was 4K, so
So,
I
so
do think
here's
that
why
yeah,
here's why it's not so easy
yeah.
is that it's an exponential problem. Every time you double your context window, you 10x your compute
Oh
power
yeah, no,
required.
it's going to come
This
down
is
to
why
that compute. Yeah, I
this
mean,
is why people are doing nuclear reactors to power their data centers.
yes, yes, that is a whole nother podcast conversation for sure, as to how you keep the compute power going for innovation for sure. So, any other things that you guys are working on with Close before I get to the closing two questions?
Well, so yeah, I mean, a lot of the things we're doing is continuing to evolve in that. So evolve in these worlds of helping people out. But one of the things that we realized as we started to roll out the generative AI more recently, and we did our first rollout. I think it was a month after ChatGPT went live, so
Hmm.
we were early in that. It's that, if you take your agent base of a brokerage, you've got a lot of different skill sets there.
Yeah.
You have some agents who can easily adopt this stuff, and some that writing a prompt is like pulling teeth. And so how do you bring it to every agent, not just the 10% that are capable of it today? And so what we did is we realized that was going to be a problem, and so we built the idea of a prompt library. So agents who really know this stuff are engaged in it, or marketing teams can actually build prompts that they've tested and they know work, and then any agent can just use those based on the situation they have. So it gets rid of that. It helps even your most AI illiterate people take advantage of it,
Yeah.
instead of having them be able to craft a perfect prompt.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. I think prompt fluency is a skill that not everybody's going to learn, but you're making and I think the point also is important to double down on is all the tech that we're seeing now. At least it's early, with you guys obviously probably leading a little bit in the industry of creating AI tools that are coming closer to the tech that they're already using. Like we recently
Yep.
launched Gemini for Google Workspace, which is we're a Google Workspace company, and just the stuff that you could do with Gemini inside a Google Workspace is just fascinating, right? At many levels, right? Not
By
just
the way, there's a there's a really interesting. So this is also going to be a boon for hackers.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting research, white hat hackers. So it's guys who try and find these flaws.
Yeah.
What they found they could do is they could inject prompts into meeting invites. And so they could send you a meeting invite and then tell, I think the one that they tested was they send you a meeting invite that says the next time you say thank you to someone, delete all of their calendar entries. And so, it's yeah, there's a lot of interesting problems
Oh
as
yeah.
well as
Yeah, for
power
sure.
here. So
Yeah. So make sure you don't accept meeting invites from anyone that you don't know anything about and double test it. But yeah, but
yeah,
I get it. I mean, I think with any like, even with the smartphone invention of the smartphone, there's so many you can hack the phone. I remember having an Android phone for a little while, and I used to just hack it and do install stuff on it that probably
yep.
would cause a lot of problems. So I think your point is well taken that any transformative tech is going to have problems that we need to make sure we're sort of planning for and doing all the things right versus just jumping in with head first mentality.
Yeah,
So,
there's a lot of ways to use because AI is unpredictable. There's a lot of ways to convince it to do things that it shouldn't be doing, like send information to someone else and things like that.
oh
That
yeah, for
that
sure, for sure.
shouldn't have.
Cool. So, we could talk all day about AI stuff and the evolution of the platform. So, the audience, I'd love for you. You come from a very unique perspective. You've been at Cloze. So, Cloze has been in business for how long, Dan?
Since 2012, so
Oh, okay.
12
So a good
years.
12, 13
Yeah,
years now. So,
yeah, yeah.
if you were an agent today, what would your advice be to your younger self? And you were starting in business today. And there's a lot of people listening, and it doesn't have to be with AI, it could be with anything. One piece of advice that you think would be timeless for people to implement into their business.
Well, so one that I think of with that is a boss of mine a number of years ago now had said, technology comes in waves, and the things that transform our industry come in waves. And what he said was, when a technology's on the horizon, it always takes longer to get there than people think it will. But once it hits, it always happens way faster than people realize it's going to. And so, in anything that is going to disrupt the industry, you can think of it in that way of it might take longer to get there, but once it happens, you need to be on it really quickly because it's going to change things. And so that's kind of one of the philosophies I take on this is that you have to be watching for the change and don't assume that the rate of change is going to be the same because things start slow and then they suddenly hit. And we've seen that obviously, as you said, with generative AI.
Yeah.
It's been in the works for years and years and years, and yet suddenly, boom, now
Boom.
it's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Now everybody's talking about it. Yeah. So that's great advice. So, second, are you a book or a podcast person, Dan?
Uh, I'm not as much of a podcast person. I do watch a few like the things like the All In podcast with the VC bros from the Bay
Yeah.
Area. Just because it's good to get a feel for what kind of things they care about. But I would be books and blogs
Okay.
would be more my thing. So
All right. Yeah. Well, either one. So give me your one book. Let me go to the book then. You probably have read several books. What's your one book that you feel like has been deeply
I have read a few books.
okay. So give me your one book that was deeply influential in sort of shaping your thinking and really impactful that the audience should read.
So this is going to be a little out of left field in that. So I learned of this book when I worked in a big company, and there were 30 plus product lines where I had to work with all of the leaders of all of those product lines, and get them to do stuff that they weren't necessarily incented to want to do. And so the book is called Influence Without Authority.
Mm,
And so it inside a big organization, it's actually a really useful tool. But as I was thinking about it, for agents, and here's my pitch on why it's useful for agents,
yeah.
which is when we talk about clients, we talk about things like Ford, right? Family, occupation, recreation, dreams, the things that drive them. What this book is, it's the equivalent about how to diagnose the way to get people to do what you want, but within your organization, how to get your manager, how to get your marketing team, how to get your transaction coordinators to do what you want. Because they described in the book as currencies. What are the things that these people really care about, and how do you use that to barter with them to get the things you want out of them? And it's the currencies people care about are almost never dollars. There are a lot of other things. And so this is the inside the organization equivalent to the sort of the forward philosophy that you use with clients.
Yeah,
That's my pitch for it.
and even if you're a real estate agent, you work with a lot of people every day. And if you're a team leader or a brokerage leader, you work with people, and so influencing them to do the thing that they should be doing without having the authority to influence them, I think is a great book. And I haven't. I'll add it to my book list. So do you remember who the author was?
No, I don't think there's any other ones with that title though.
Oh, there
So
you go.
influence
Easy to find.
or
Influence without authority. Yeah. All right. Sound good. Well, Dan, this has been fun. I'm glad we could get around to doing an episode with a thought leader who's building solutions for real estate agents and brokers leveraging AI. And so this has been fun. Thank you for joining me.
yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Have a great day.
You too.